Welcome to the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers. There are no traffic jams along the extra mile when you're studying for your bar exam. And now your hosts, Jackson Mummy and Megan Saya from Celebration Bar Review.
It is Wednesday, January 19th. We are glad to have you with us as you're coming on board. Hi, Megan. How are you?
Hi, good morning or good afternoon for people on the East Coast. How's everybody doing? Hope everybody's good.
Yeah, it's morning in California. Nice to have you still with us. We are glad to be here. If you're in the Southeast and you're fighting this crazy weather, you have my sympathies. It got all the way down to 50 degrees here in Florida. I don't know.
Yeah, it's been chilly for us in California, which by chilly, maybe hitting the high 40s in the dead of night. So yeah.
That's it. We are getting closer to 30 days until the February exam. We're at about 35 days. So we've got a lot of good student questions to cover today, have a few announcements for you. And then Megan, you and I are going to do a deeper dive in the subject of diversity in federal civil procedure. Woohoo!
Yes. Yeah. I think it's a very manageable subtopic. So hopefully we'll give people a little bit of practice, and hopefully that's helpful for anybody who's feeling a bit confused about some of the stickier areas of diversity jurisdiction.
Yeah, and this came up because we had some student questions in our private community group about diversity. So I want to just encourage you, if you've got substantive questions about an area, send those out to us. Let us know. It's what we use for these teaching sessions. And we've been really getting great feedback, haven't we, about the teaching sessions?
Yeah, I'm glad people are liking them. I think it's really fun to go through a specific subject and get a little bit of practice with the multiple choice questions.
Yeah, it's good for me. Just my brain, I've forgotten more stuff than I probably should. And so it's, oh yeah, I remember this. Did I lecture about this? Yes, I did. So there you go. So we'll have some fun with that.
One last quick note before we jump into student questions, which is just that there have been no more changes to the way the exam or the date of the exam, the way it's going to be given since Nevada changed before. I just want to follow up with people that I know there's been a lot of chatter of, okay, so Nevada's going to do it online. And then the NCBE said that people could do it in March if their state wouldn't allow them to gather. As of right now, no movement. So the closer we get to that February date, obviously, the less likely it will be that there will be movement, but we'll keep you guys updated, but nothing new right now. All right. So let's jump in. We just have a couple of admin questions, and then we have a lot of really good study strategy questions that we'll get into. All right. I was able to break down the questions into some different categories today. So first we have a few that are about performance tests specifically.
Okay.
All right, then these are actually pretty related. So I think I'm going to say them together and then we can take performance tests as a whole.
Okay.
All right, so first person said, after trying your method of how to write the performance exam, I'm still only completing 2/3 by the 90-minute mark. Do you have any suggestions other than to keep practicing? Okay, and then another student, this student, they were very close to passing, but their MPTs and MEEs were lacking. And they said, I want to do practice essays and MPTs all the time, but I'm afraid of burning out. And I'm still very slow with the MPTs and not finishing in time. My organization is lacking. So what kind of advice would you give to people who have to do these performance tests, particularly with timing and organization?
Okay. Well, let me give some ideas, and then Megan, why don't you jump in as well, because you coach a lot on this as well. I think the first place to start organizationally is to identify tone and audience. And I know that sounds really fundamental, but I think if you don't understand tone and audience, you're likely to waste a lot of time. So I think you want to identify if this is a factual or an objective tone to a legal audience, it's an essay, it's going to be FLA, and that's your organizational pattern. If it's persuasive to a legal audience, it's FLA with an adjustment that says instead of who wins and why, we win because, but it's still basically FLA. When you get to an objective task to a non-legal audience, that's a drafting task, and that's literally just taking what the client wants and figuring out based on the law what you can do. So it's a very lawyer-like task. And then the last category that hardly ever comes up is persuasive to a non-legal audience. And then I think you can still use FLA, but it's a little more adaptive. So I think you start with that. Then the second thing is that I think in practice, you want to be very aware of the splits, right? We're getting into Olympic season, right? What's your split at this mark? 5 minutes to do a quick read or skim of the material or photo read is the first step. The second step is 10 minutes in the library. And when you're practicing, take your phone or a timer and set it at 10 minutes. The only way to get used to doing this is to literally be at 10 minutes every time. And in 10 minutes, you're really thinking about what are the test rules and elements, and you're really just skimming. You're not trying to read in detail. When people have timing problems, it's almost always because they spend too long in the library doing too much detail work. That's been my experience. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. It's very easy to get bogged down with the cases in particular.
Yeah, so you want to be thinking about these test rules and elements, 10 minutes. Then when your timer goes off, even if you don't feel like you're ready, jump into the file and set your timer again for 10 minutes. And then look for the details that fit into those test rules and elements. That's lawyering task. When the timer goes off at 10 minutes again, stop, even if you don't feel like you've done everything you needed to do, and give yourself 5 minutes to outline your answer. And really outline it from start to finish. Get the main headings and the big points that you want on your answer. Now you've got 60 minutes to draft unless you're getting accommodations. So 60 minutes of drafting time is plenty of time, knowing that you can go back into the library and back into the file to begin to get the detail that you need, and you start filling in under each of those headings. I think that when you are working in practice and you are practicing these under timing conditions, you will get faster doing this. When people don't get far enough, it's almost always because they're spending too long in preparation and not enough in drafting. So that's my primary recommendation. There's no magic feather here, but in general, people go down the rabbit hole. They try to do too much, they get into too much detail, and then they confuse themselves and they forget the tone and audience. And so then they're just scrambling around trying to do a stream of consciousness. And I think that's a problem. What suggestions would you add to that?
Yeah, I just echo everything that you said. And I feel like with the performance test, people try to reinvent the wheel every time. Don't do that. There's no reason to. With the organization, when you can use FLA or a modified FLA, do that, because then you will not have to think about and create whole cloth an entirely new organizational structure. And honestly, if you can't use FLA or a modified FLA, it's probably because they've told you exactly what format they want you to use. So they've said, draft this particular document. Here's the first heading. And then what we want you to say, here's the second, right? So then obviously you don't have to invent any organizational structure there, just do exactly what they've told you to do. So I think sometimes with performance tests, people make it harder on themselves than it needs to be within the organizational structure. And they throw everything out that they've learned about writing for the bar and try to just in that 90 minutes, create something brand new every time. And that's just a really unnecessary amount of work that you're putting on yourself.
Yeah, I would say if you're typing, and you should be typing your answers, I'd like to see you at 1,500 to 1,800 words. I know some people can type. We've got some people on the course right now who can do 3,000 words in a 90 minutes, but you don't need that. Really, 1,500 to 1,800 words will give you a passing answer virtually every time. And if you've been trying to hit 2,000 plus, that's going to put you under a lot of strain and pressure, and you don't need to do that. So keep that in mind. But practice. I would say everyone in a performance test jurisdiction should be doing at least one performance test a week from here until the exam. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah. And if you need help with your performance tests, Jackson and I are here. So that is a huge part. The coaching calls that we do, it's up to you how you want to spend that time. So like for the student who asked, I don't do performance tests, so can I have a separate option just for essays? It doesn't matter. It's up to you. Even if you're in a performance test jurisdiction, if for you, you've already gotten passing scores consistently on performance tests in the past, and you need to focus on your essays, great, keep sending us essays. If for you, you really struggle with performance tests, we can do as many as you feel like you need to do and discuss. So very much, I think performance tests get forgotten sometimes. The coaching is there for that as well. So I always like to see at least one performance test from my students to get a feel for how they're doing with it. And some of them we do quite a few because they really struggle with it. And so we talk through it, and then they don't have to struggle alone and they can get a handle on it. All right. So next, let's talk about the essays.
Okay.
First question, I like this, made me laugh. The student said, my MEEs seem a bit wimpy. I'm doing great with FLA style. It's tremendously helpful, and that makes a huge difference. I can put on an essay in 30 minutes, but it's just not that great. 35 minutes would be ideal. Any suggestions? And yes, it's the analysis section that's wimpy. I'm finding I want to be more specific. I just don't know how to beef that part up, basically.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I think adrenaline will get you from 35 down to 30 on the exam for a lot of people. However, what I would do is draft out the skeleton of the answer, FLA, and make sure you get from the beginning to the end of the answer with all of that. And then in the last 5 minutes of your preparation of the 30 minutes, go back to the more significant parts of the question and beef up the analysis paragraph. You don't need a big analysis paragraph everywhere on every call of the question, but maybe on 2 or 3 of them, there's really something specific that you want to add to it. And so pick your shot about where you want to put in a little more detail. I think that's the other way. And then just practicing, remembering that you're still a long way from the exam and you're not going to plateau here. You're going to continue to get better. And that's one of the areas where we see improvement typically from people, don't we?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. The analysis, the application is the hardest part to write, but it's the most important. It's really the key of what they're judging you on with the essays. And so it's good that this person recognizes that needs to be beefed up. I would also say, I don't know who wrote this, so I'm not sure if I've seen their essays, but I would definitely say, I'm curious what their fact paragraph looks like, because a lot of times what ends up happening, what I see is facts feel really comfortable. And so people will write a whole, you've just beautifully summarized the entire fact pattern for me. And then their application is 2 sentences. So if that is the case, I would go and look at that fact paragraph and see, am I really keeping it to a tight 1 to 2 sentences? That'll give you the time. I'd really want you to spend that time in the application, not in the facts, even though the facts feel a lot more comfortable of a place to hang out. You're just doing yourself a disservice if that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right. Next, I had issues with family law essays when it came to the arguments, because the question was only if the court would allow something to happen, not spouse versus spouse. I put the argument of the spouse, and then the analysis was between the spouse and the court. Is that okay?
No, the court is never a party. The court is ruling in favor of one party or the other, so don't get mistaken by that. So if the court is supposed to do something, they're doing it on behalf of party A or party B. So it's still about the conflict or the dispute. This is one of my pet peeves. I just hate it when somebody says the court will argue. The court will never argue. The court will just tell you what their decision is. So it's always between the parties. Don't get confused about that. And I think the bigger question here is, do you write differently in different subjects? And the answer to that is absolutely not. This writing style that we've developed over 30 years is really proven across all subjects in all jurisdictions. And you don't need to modify it or amend it because you're in family law or UCC or something else. It's really designed the same approach every time.
Great. All right. And then another student said, upon further review of the model answers to CRIM and corporations essays, I see that there are several arguments made in the law paragraph with supporting law, as opposed to the strict 1 argument per side approach.
Yeah.
Is it okay to write in this manner on the bar, or should I save the additional arguments for the analysis?
You should absolutely save them for the additional analysis. I see the second paragraph, Megan, as being something like an obstacle course. You want to get through it with the least amount of friction so that you can get to that third paragraph that we're talking about, where you get to do the analysis. And if you bog down the second paragraph with too many sentences of arguments and law, it really becomes an obstacle for the reader to get through that paragraph to get into the third paragraph. So our goal here is like a highway on-ramp. It's to move traffic from the beginning of the on-ramp in the fact paragraph seamlessly up to the middle, the law paragraph, the flashing red lights in California on the 405, and then onto the highway, which is the application paragraph. And I think the more stuff you put in the middle there, the harder it is for the reader. What's your take there?
Yeah, I think you want to distill down in your mind, what are the 2 best arguments? So what is the best argument for each party? And What gets to the, and best might not mean always the strongest. It's more what gets to the meat of the call of the question. So what is the conflict here between the parties? So if the conflict is about, gosh, I'm trying to think of an example, but if the conflict it's always going to be about something fairly specific. And so you don't want to give a super broad, like, the evidence is admissible. No, it's not. I mean, it's just like not terribly helpful. So get a specific
policy. You don't want public policy discussion when you're just a simple argument, right?
Exactly. Get to the meat of what's going on, make it clear and focused on what does this boil down to? What are the parties arguing about? And then when you're in the application, you have the ability, and you should expand on that. And so this student actually wrote in there, should I save the additional arguments for the analysis paragraph, time permitting? And that gave me a little bit of a heart attack, right? Because it's no, not time permitting. You have to do that. That's not if I have time, I will put in analysis. Like, you have to put in that kind of analysis. That's a mindset shift, right? That is not an optional, if I've got the time, I will discuss fully this conflict. This is like the number one thing you've got to do is discuss this conflict. Anyway, yes, it's a really good question. I think that organizationally, it's just a lot easier for your reader to follow if you are very clear on, here's the argument and the rationale for why, here's the law that supports it, here's the counter argument and the rationale why, which is responsive, and the law that supports that, as opposed to, I'm going to argue this based on this, but then this person's going to say this over here, but then they could respond over here, and then over here, this party, right? Like, it's just hard to follow that. So let's not do that.
I call that the fireworks approach, right? There's bang over here, and then bang over here, and then bang over here, and the reader doesn't know where to look. So you want this linear approach. And I think if you're staying with that, then you'll have the time that you're talking about, Megan, in the application paragraph.
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that comes up a lot. Okay, so next
we're getting better questions as we get closer to the exam.
Yeah, no, I love it. People really, it's good. It's good. People are definitely well into their studies, and then we can tell because we get questions like this, which are really focused on the practical application of what they're doing. So it's great. All right. Then let's move on to MBE questions. I was wondering if you think it would be a good idea to jump on the 800 mixed questions, and then after doing about half of them, take the OPEs. Okay. I've completed all my substantive studies.
What the student is talking about is typically in the study process, we've got you going through the first 100 questions in each of the multi-state subjects. Then we have you come back and do another 100 questions in each subject. And when you are doing that, then we would take you to the online practice exams, which are 100 or 200 question exams. What this student is asking, we have an online test bank made up of 800 randomized questions from all 7 subjects. And that's there just for you to get some random practice online. Could you do, say, 400 of those questions and then move on? The answer to me is that's not a good plan. And the reason is we want you to get a balance of second level questions in all the subjects. Those randomized questions might randomize out with a disproportionate number of torts or contracts or property, and you wouldn't get enough, let's say, civil procedure, and therefore you would be underprepared or underrepresented in that subject. So I would use the 800 questions for those of you that feel like you have to do so many MBEs a day, which I don't recommend, but if you feel like you've got to, that's where you would go to do them, just to warm your brain up. I've had students tell me they do 5 or 10 of those every morning before they start their study. And I think that's a perfectly good way to use that test bank, but that's the way I would use it. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Yeah, and then Amanda put in the chat box that she's been doing your advice, Jackson, to do 15 to 20 questions as a warm-up. So yeah, and the key there, I love that, Amanda, and adding to my mind maps as I go. That was the right thing to say.
Oh, she gets a great.
Yes, that's what I want to hear. Adding to the mind map. Okay, speaking of mind maps, our last question before we jump into the diversity jurisdiction practice is just wondering who is using mind maps and what are your thoughts? Is it too late to start now for February's exam? Great question.
Yeah. The answer is no, it's not too late to start. It is never too late to start with mind maps. You can, if you want a really quick, fast way to do it. This is a product in which we have created the first 2 levels and sometimes more of mind maps so that you can build right off of those. And that's in every subject, both state and multi-state. So I think that's a great resource. If you don't want to use that resource, you could build your own mind maps. I would start with the table of contents in each subject and build from there. I think that mind mapping is the single most important thing you can do to study. So to me, it is not too late at all. In terms of experiences that people have with mind maps, I think they're very positive. When we talk to successful bar takers, right, we hear this all the time, that the mind maps were a big part of their success.
Yeah, I just will never stop harping on it. Like, you should all be doing them, all of you, every single person. It is crucially important to be doing something with the material that you're learning. You cannot, it's not going to be osmosis. You have to actually do something with it. And that thing is the process of making your mind maps, of adding to them, of reading them out loud, talk them out loud to yourself. Before you go to bed at night, pick one and just talk about it out loud. Some people record themselves saying it, and then they'll listen to that, whatever makes sense to you. But I want you, they are dynamic and they should be changing and moving, and you should be working with them throughout the process. Definitely.
Yeah, and to be clear, you don't need to do a mind map on all 14 subjects, right? If at this point in time, if you've not done any mind maps, I would take the top 5 or 6 subjects in terms of difficulty for you, and I would mind map those for sure. Think about the gain you would get in understanding by doing that. So it's not like you have to do everything, but bar maps will give you all of that in one spot. So that's why I would recommend it to you. Again, it's designed to help you at this end point in being more efficient in your study.
Yeah. All right. One more question in the chat box. Nicole asked, how far before the exam should substantive assignments be done? Great question.
Yeah, our benchmark is by February 10th, you should be done with substantive assignments, which means about 50% of the course if you're following that tracking percentile in the course platform. I am really impressed, aren't you, Megan, with how many people have already hit that mark, and we're here in mid-January. I'm really excited about that. But if you get there at the 10th, great. If you get there on the 14th, that's still okay. It just means your review is going to be a little bit less. You will see in my daily email countdowns, I'll have some benchmarks, and I'll talk about that more as we get in. I know that for many of you, it feels like the bar exam is right here, it's right now. It is not. I want to continue to emphasize that. It is a long way away. And so don't be in a rush, just keep working. At this stage, if you're not at the end of your substantive review, that's fine. We don't expect you to be. And so what you want to do is plot out your studies from now until the 10th and see how many units you need to finish up between now and then you can plan accordingly.
Great. And then one more question just came through. I struggle with making the mind maps one word. Okay, they don't have to be one word. So we'll wait a second. But this person said the maps end up being a lot of information on one page. Any tips? I do want to point out, Jackson, before you answer this, that we're going to see an example of Jackson's mind map in 2 minutes. And so I do want you to use that. You do not have to create something exactly like that by any stretch of the imagination, but hopefully that shows you that sometimes you're going to have a small sentence, or sometimes you might have a list. So however it makes sense for you is fine, but it does not have to be as brief as I think some people assume that it needs to be.
Yeah, and I'll say, we're going to show you my diversity mind map. I made it in 10 or 15 minutes. And clearly I understand the material, but it just isn't that complicated. And sometimes people make these into monoliths and they don't need to be.
So with that, let's jump into the diversity jurisdiction discussion, and we'll do a little practice and we will see an example of some mind maps. And yeah, hopefully this is helpful for people.
Yeah. So we've been talking about the study questions to keep you awake, and sometimes they keep me awake when a student says, I had a problem with something. And this week, that's what happened. We got an email and a posting from a student said there was a particular question regarding diversity that I got wrong, but for some reason, even with the explanation, I still can't wrap my head around why the answer provided is correct. Turned out that the answer explanation was just completely screwed up. And so that got us down the rabbit hole of diversity. And the more I went into diversity, I thought, this is a good subject to really talk about. and help explain how you work through it. So thanks for asking that question. So what I want to do is give you a couple of questions, if time is permitting, to talk about diversity and show you then how we mind mapped it and how we came to a conclusion. And for those of you that are just listening, what I want to do is read the question to you. And we're not going to go through all the answer choices the way we typically do. We're going to try and dive just into the diversity part. But here's our question. Pick, a resident of state A, was walking along his street when he was struck and seriously injured by a car driven by Doolittle and owned by Higgins Corp. Doolittle is a British citizen but resides in state A. Higgins Corp is incorporated in state B and has its principal place of business in state B, but is authorized to do business in state A and in fact does business in state A. Pick brings an action in federal court in state A against Doolittle and Higgins Corp to recover the $80,000 in medical expenses which resulted from the accident. So that was one sentence, sorry. All right, now the action is properly brought in state A against, and then we're going to get several choices. And let's just look at those choices, and then Megan, you and I'll talk about this a little bit. So the action is properly brought A against Doolittle only, or B against the Higgins Corp only, or C, both Doolittle and Higgins Corp, or D, neither Doolittle nor Higgins Corp. Now, having said that, Megan, what jumps out at you when you're looking at this as a diversity problem?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I would do as I was going through the question is be really clear on whose residence is where, right? For the purposes of diversity jurisdiction. So we've got Pick is state A for sure. Then we've got Doolittle, British citizen, but resides in state A. I'm going to hold on to that. Higgins Corp incorporated in state B and principal place of business in state B, does some business in state A, right? But I'm definitely looking at, okay, seems to be telling me state B here. And then the question of this is being brought in state A and we know $80,000. So we know right away that should jump out at you as, oh, I've passed the $75,000 requirement.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things going on. We're looking at the amount in controversy. That one seems pretty easy. We're looking at where a corporation's state of residence is, and we're going to look at that a little bit further in another question. But clearly, we've got this whole question of are they a resident of state B or state A? And then we've got Doolittle, and does Doolittle screw up diversity? That seems to be the problem that we're looking at. And so in order to figure that out, we want to look at these four choices, as I said. And at this point, we now want to look, I think, at our mind map. So I have a mind map up of diversity jurisdiction. I know that's a small one and maybe a little challenging for people to read, as Megan talked about. And for purposes of just working through it, let me just talk about what we did here. And we're going to make this available as a download for you so that you can get it. But when we start up at the beginning in that upper right-hand corner, we're talking about how diversity works. And the rule is that federal district courts have jurisdiction where the matter in controversy exceeds the sum of $75,000. And then everything to the right of that is just details, but we don't need that. We've already identified that it's an $80,000 problem, right? So now we go to the next rule, which is in purple, and I'll read it. And it says, diversity jurisdiction is between citizens of different states, or citizens of a state and foreign states, or citizens or subjects thereof. And 3, citizens of different states in which foreign states or citizens or subject thereof are additional parties. Ding, ding. We've just won the jackpot, haven't we? What does that tell us about our British friend Doolittle? What do you get?
It tells us, right, that hopefully everybody sees this, that what that means is the fact that he's a citizen or he's a British citizen means it doesn't matter that he is also a resident of the same state as the plaintiff.
And that's all the examiners are doing. They're testing those first 2 rules of our mind map. And so they become pretty important to us. And this one becomes really easy at that point, doesn't it, Megan?
Yes, it should be very simple then now.
So now let's look at it. So the answer choice is C. And what we're saying here is that a federal court has diversity jurisdiction. The amount in controversy exceeds 75,000. We know that. And the action is between citizens of different states or citizens of a state and citizens or subjects of a foreign state. Oh, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? So here, the amount in controversy exceeds 75,000. and diversity exists between Pick, Doolittle, and Higgins Corp. So let's break that down. Pick is a resident of state A. Higgins Corp has a corporate residence in state B. Now, we didn't look at the corporate definition here, but let's just go back for a minute. And I'll tell you that in that green box on the left there, it says a corporation is deemed a citizen of any state in which it's been incorporated and the state in which it has its principal place of business. So if we had a question about our corporation, that would answer it for us, right? That now, when we look at that, it looks like Higgins is going to be in state B. Why? Because that's where their corporate headquarters are and it's where they're incorporated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. This is an example of the don't fight the facts, right? If they tell you that their corporate headquarters are in state B, they're incorporated in state B, and they do pretty much all their business in state B, don't think, oh, they're probably trying to trick me and they're really residents of state A, right?
Yeah, exactly. just live with it, okay? And then finally, although Doolittle lives in state A, there's still diversity because what? Doolittle, love that, is a citizen of a foreign country, and therefore his state of residence is irrelevant to a diversity determination, okay? Now, to our student's original question, that is not the answer explanation that was in the book. It made no sense. I got to admit, that answer explanation that we had in the book was completely crazy, but this is the real answer explanation. So if you're watching today, our apologies, but there you go. That is literally the definition and the description that you need. And you can see that it's really a pretty simple question, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this one should be fairly self-evident. So hopefully now, if any of you see a question and somebody is a citizen of another country, you will know immediately that where they are considered to reside for the purposes of diversity. So that's great.
And so what the bar examiners were doing is they were testing three principles here. They were testing the amount of controversy, they were testing where a corporation has its state of residence, and they were testing foreign citizens. And that's a pretty good example of a question that's going to touch on three things, but they were all in your mind map. And so pretty easy once you understand what the concepts are. Are we feeling confident to go to another question here?
Yeah, I think we could probably do one more.
All right, let's do that. So our next question says, Valerie, a California resident, sues Tice Industries in federal court for a defect in one of their products. Which of the following facts, if true, would destroy diversity jurisdiction? So you want to circle that word, right? So statement one is that Tice Industries has a sales office in California. Statement two is that Tice Industries has 10 manufacturing plants, and one of them is located in California. And statement three is that Tice Industries directs the activities of the 10 manufacturing plants from its corporate office in California. So again, we're going back to how do we determine where a corporation has its residence, because are any of those statements such that it would blow up diversity? Since Valerie's in California, really the question we're asking is, how do we figure out if Tice is in California? Is that the way we want to think about it?
Exactly. Do we want to have students write down in the chat box,
Yeah.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 2, 3, whatever they think, which ones, if true, would destroy diversity jurisdiction? So just type which numbers or number you think would destroy diversity jurisdiction if it was true.
Yeah, and remember, we've just gone through this rule that a corporation is deemed a citizen of any state in which it has been incorporated and the state in which it has its principal place of business. And if I could sing the Jeopardy theme song, I would do that, but I can't. So there you go. Megan, tell me when you think we're ready to roll on.
Yeah, I think we're getting 3 only.
Okay, all right. So let's see what we got here. Oop, go back. Okay, so remember, that's where we were. It was that green box on the left. Okay, now, all right, the first statement was Tice Industries has a sales office in California. That's going to be incorrect. It's not sufficient to destroy diversity jurisdiction. Just having a sales office doesn't mean that you're doing business in that state or that you're a resident of that state. If you thought that just having a sales office was enough, you were wrong. And so any answer explanation that included answer 1 would have been wrong. Okay. Let's look at answer 2. What about having 10 manufacturing plants, one of them located in California? Is that going to be enough? No. Manufacturing plant just in California is not sufficient to destroy diversity jurisdiction. So would 6 be enough? Maybe. I think it's a closer question, don't you?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but 1 out of 10, probably not. And so that leads us with, they direct the activities from their corporate office in California. Hello, if the corporation office is located there, that would destroy diversity jurisdictions. That is its principal place of business. So when you see corporate office, that's the principal place of business. So if you selected item 3, then you were correct, and that is the right answer. So there you go. Oh, Megan, I feel really strong. Can we go on and do one more question?
Yep, I think we can.
All right, let's go for it. Here's the third question. Lebanon Company, a life insurance company incorporated and doing business in State A, insured Helmut's life for $2,000. Helmut died last month. Wilma, a resident of State A, and Otto, a resident of State B, have valid but conflicting claims to the proceeds of the insurance policy. To determine who gets the proceeds of the policy, Lebanon Company commenced an interpleader action in federal court in State A. Wilma then moved to dismiss on the grounds that 1, diversity of citizenship is lacking, and 2, the amount in controversy did not support federal jurisdiction. Wilma's motion should be granted on the basis of 1 only, 2 only, both 1 and 2, or neither 1 and 2. So again, her 2 grounds are diversity and the amount in controversy. All right, so what do we do with that? I think it's interpleader. That's my magic.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Interpleader. Okay. Now, we did not talk about interpleader yet in our mind maps. Let's move on here. So when we talk about interpleader on the mind map, as we know, diversity jurisdiction requires complete diversity requirement, but interpleader is an exception. And with interpleader, you only need what's called minimal diversity. With interpleader, you don't need complete diversity. And so what we've got to know is, what is an interpleader, right? How would we define that here? Why is this an interpleader action?
It's because it's the insurance company. So it's not the actual person who was directly harmed.
Yeah.
They're just, yeah.
For those that don't know interpleader, it simply means that a third party is holding on to an asset and they're saying, look, we don't care who gets it, but we can't make the decision. So the insurance companies will file what's called an interpleader action and say, court, you tell us whether in this case it should be Helmut or Wilma that gets it. We don't care who it is. And because the insurance company isn't really a party to the case, they're just holding it almost like a bailment would be, then the rules say we don't have to count them for diversity purposes. So given that fact, we know that Wilma's in State A and Otto's in State B. So in that particular case, we know that in this circumstance, diversity jurisdiction exists. So having then looked at that, the next piece was that it's a case for $2,000. Remember, interpleader actions only require a $500 amount in controversy means. The answer explanation is that the diversity of citizenship requirements not lacking, because while complete diversity is required, the one exception to that complete rule is interpleader, which requires only minimal diversity. So the statutes permit someone like an insurance company who's holding property, in this case claimed by 2 or more persons, they basically deposit the property with the court and they let the claimants litigate ownership. So since all we need is minimal diversity, that means any 2 claimants, as long as they're citizens of different states, and that's the rule here. Wilma is a resident of State A, Otto's a resident of State B, so Wilma's motion will not be granted based on lack of diversity, even though Lebanon is also a resident of State A. And then obviously it's meeting the $500 requirement. So there you go.
Great.
Fun stuff, huh?
Yeah. Yes. So hopefully this makes sense. I think it's not a terribly complicated subject, but it has a lot of weird, quirky rules that you just have to know. But the benefit of going through this is that I think people have got these weird, quirky rules. Hopefully we've cemented them a little bit in your brains so you'll be ready. There is a couple of questions I'm seeing. First, on the previous question with Doolittle, if there is diversity, could he as a non-citizen sue Pick?
Yeah, I mean, he could. Yeah, but remember, Doolittle's the one driving the car. Could he sue the pedestrian? I don't know why.
Bold.
Could he sue the company that he was working for? Probably not. Don't fight the facts. Don't make it too complicated, okay? They write these questions in a very narrow way, so don't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. All right.
And again, I will just say that we're taking the diversity jurisdiction mind map. It is already in your bar maps as a link in civil procedure, as a sub mind map. We will include it with this discussion as a downloaded PDF so that you can see it and work with it that way. Again, in our, we use mindmeister.com. They had a weird week last week, but they're fixed now and everything is good. So I would encourage you to use that mind map. All right. Did we cover everything?
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah, I hope this is helpful as always. I'm glad we got through those questions, could show you a little bit about diversity. And again, I think the study questions we're getting right now are really starting to get focused. People are locking in, and that's always a good sign and something I really want to see people doing. And so I know there's a lot going on. I know there's a lot happening with COVID and everything else that's happening in the world. Try and keep your focus for just a few more weeks. We're gonna get there in 35 days, and you'll be okay. You're doing right. Take advantage of the tools that we're offering, the group coaching, the chaos, calming the chaos, personal writing workshops, the time management, coaching calls with us. And I think you're going to be just fine. So anything else you want to add, Megan, before we wrap up?
No, I hope everybody has a great week and studies well and studies hard and studies in a way that does not drive yourself totally bonkers. Good luck.
Yeah, or the people around you, right?
Yeah.
Then we will be back next Wednesday, and we will give us another topic. I'm having fun doing these topics. So if there's something else you want us to jump into, jump in the community group, post, or send us an email and let us know. And we'll put together another teaching session. So thanks everybody for being here, and we will see you all again next week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening and watching the Extra Mile podcast for bar exam takers at celebrationbarreview.com.